Hello and welcome to the Digital Workplace Summit. My name is Malcolm Lowry. I'll be your host and moderator for this 2-day global live stream on remote working moving forward. And in the studio with me is our first speaker, Patrick Couch. Patrick, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Give you the 2020
there you have it.
handshake. Great to have you here. If you could just stay put while I introduce myself and introduce the event.
Perfect.
Great. And our first speaker is Patrick Couch, who's the business developer of AI and cognitive technologies at IBM. Now, Patrick works as a business developer at IBM, focused on artificial intelligence, cognitive technology, and the Internet of Things. And Patrick was writing his master thesis at Stockholm University on human-machine learning when, in the late 90s, he was pulled out of the academic world and lured into the dot-com world of Stockholm and the booming new economy that this world was presenting. And he's been with IBM since 2010, but he's still on sabbatical from his PhD because I think that the work that he's doing is so fascinating and interesting. So Patrick, if you'd like to take your presenting place, I'd really be happy to hand over to you. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you on these 6 macro trends of digital hyper-locality.
There you have it.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
it away.
Thank you for the introduction. Okay, so hyper-locality and trends. So basically, I will try and set the scene a little bit for these 2 days and provide maybe the big picture, or what I consider to be the big picture, by calling attention to some of these macro trends that I see emerging. And as Malcolm touched upon in his introduction, when I was at the university, I was in the humanities, so I'm less comfortable with numbers than with some of the softer parts. So therefore, I figured out it's actually not 6, but there are 7 macro trends that I will cover today. All right. With that said, then, the first trend that I want to call out is that the workplace and the marketplace will continue to converge and merge. And I think everybody who is taking part of this seminar is also presenting themselves or conducting themselves on social media platforms of various kinds. And this has really become commonplace. It has become an expectation that we as individuals, as employees, as employers, as consumers, as producers, in all of our various ways of presenting ourselves, we do so through the social media platforms that we sort of lean on. And that means that we have sort of started to recreate ourselves as brands rather than perhaps as individuals. And this carries nicely over onto the digital landscape, because on the digital landscape, brands move freely. And you can think of the logical end point or the fullest flowering of such a self-definition as a brand in the notion of the influencer. And the role of the influencer has really become this self-employed, self-empowered segment of one brand person who is a marketplace, a workplace, a spinner of tales and of influence, all in its own. And I think this is a great change now. And I think for us to be successful as people living in a digital era, we need to think ourselves as brands. And we need to look at this convergence where we see not just workplace, marketplace converge, but also concepts of identity. Who are we actually? Are we the ones that we truly are, or are we the ones that we present or project onto the digital platforms? So that's the first macro trend. The second macro trend is that, as I see it, digitalization will continue to recreate the world in the image of a global village. And the global village was something that Marshall McLuhan, the media professor, coined in the late 60s. And I think the model or the idea of a global village is very operatively valid for us. I think it's a good way of framing your outlook because it gives you tools to use when you want to sort of move in this space. And basically what Marshall McLuhan said was that he looked out on the technologies emerging in the 60s and said the new electronic interdependence recreates the world in the image of a global village. And I think two things are important to consider here. One is the interdependence. I think Marshall McLuhan really understood how digital technologies or how electronic technologies build community, and we will touch upon this later on. And in the sense that once we go online, we're all online and we all partake of the same thing. So we're all connected, which means that we are dependent upon each other in a radically different way. If the influencer wants to have some pull or push, it needs to touch a lot of people. If things need to take off digitally, they need to go viral. So there needs to be a dependence or a recognition of the interdependence that is actually there. But then I think also this concept then of the village is very, very appealing, because it shows us that we should think of our world as smaller than we have perhaps previously been taught. So if you think of your world as you live in a village, then that has certain implications for you. And one of those aspects that McLuhan also pointed out when he spoke about the global village was that he said, we now live in a global village of our own making, a simultaneous happening. It doesn't necessarily mean harmony and peace and quiet, but it does mean huge involvement in everybody else's affairs. And I think these times, the COVID-19 times, truly, in a very stark way, shows the validity of this. So he basically said, okay, think of the world as a global image. It's all digital. It's a single village. We all live in it. So when something like COVID-19 or the new coronavirus comes along, it impacts the entire village, which is, in our case, is the entire world, the entire globe. There's no escape there. So basically, we are in the situation where our globalization and our digitalization has created the situation where we are all digital butterflies in some way or shape or form. We can really sort of impact others vastly across the globe simply because we live in the same village. So if somebody eats a bat in China, all of a sudden you can't go to work and people are dying all over the place. So this is, of course, a radical and drastic example, but it really calls attention to the nature of the matter at hand, namely that we live, although in an open horizon digital world, we do live in a small global village. All right. Third macro trend. Loyalty will continue to shift from nations and corporations to self-delineated, digitally defined tribes. This should be self-evident if we think about some of the people that have had a lot of gravitational pull lately. So if you think of Greta Thunberg and the climate strike, which took off some years ago, or if you think of politics in the US, where you have Donald being a very divisive president, people really love him or hate him, and then you have Bernie, or had Bernie, also a very divisive person. A lot of people love him, others hate him and think he's a socialist, crazy person. So it hasn't, in the US and in politics, there's no joint allegiance to the nation or the flag in the way it was the case before. So now people aggregate towards these people that they resonate with and think and buy their own values. And in Sweden, of course, if you think of the current times, you have Anders Tegnell, who's getting a lot of criticism and a lot of accolades at the same time. So he has put a fork in the ground and said, well, this is the point of view that we are communicating and sticking to. And then people have a lot of issues with that or a lot of praise for that. But regardless, the trend is that we tend to identify these people that we gravitate towards because they resonate with our own value systems, and that takes precedence over any kind of proxy like you should be loyal to your corporation, your employer, or your nation, or something like that. And just think about the 2018 Google walkout, where over 100,000, 200,000 people just walked out from Google offices in protesting sexual harassment in the workplace. So there's no inherent traditional allegiance to old structures in the transformation of the workplace. So it becomes much more about understanding yourself in relationship to your fellow individuals that you interact with. Okay. Macro trend number 4 impacting the workplace and marketplace. Circularity will continue to supersede linearity as the informing model for sustainability. Now, linear thinking has been the preferred way of thinking about things for a long time in the industrial world. And there are a couple of assumptions made there that have perhaps shown to be problematic. One is, of course, the infinite access to resources, and the other is infinite access to new markets. So in this way, our style of thinking about the marketplace, or the workplace for that matter, is similar to the La Linea, this character who lives on the line, which is the emblem of linear thinking. And the difference between La Linea and ourselves is that when La Linea comes up against something unforeseen, or hits a brick wall, or the end of the line, or if some disruption happens, he has the privilege of sort of turning to his Italian maker and you say, listen, you need to fix the line. But for us, we don't have that luxury. There's no way to turn. We need to figure this out ourselves, and we need to figure out a way to be sustainable, which is completely different than what linear thinking sort of makes possible. So linear thinking makes great progress possible. And if you read the writings of Hans Rosling, for instance, and you look at factfulness, the one thing that Hans' cheerful optimism can't really do away with is the climatological impact of things getting better or linearly progressing. So this is, of course, something that influences us very much in the sense that we, as the current installment of humans, living in the present, we need to figure out a way to extend the horizon way beyond 2030 or whatever deadline we're setting ourselves in terms of development goals or other horizons. So we need to understand circularity, and there's of course a lot of novel ways of approaching this, and the whole idea of circular economy, circular design is certainly influencing how the market dynamics play out. But I think we also need to understand a little bit about how circularity works for us in the workplace, sort of like karma. So there's no if you are the digitally connected, all-pervasive butterfly, there is no way of getting away from the fact that your actions has consequences. So in a circular model, those consequences will come back influencing you or impacting you. So that is one trend for sure. That we're seeing the need to shift out of linearity into circularity. All right, so number 5 then. Transparency will continue to build momentum as the overarching strategy for growth. Now, I'm sure you've all noticed how popular it has become with artificial intelligence, and how artificial intelligence has very much become sort of a sign of the times. I have certainly never been in a position where my work has had this appeal privately at dinners, for instance. So if I say I work within artificial intelligence, usually I get to talk about my work at private occasions. That has never happened before. When I said I was in IT, that was that, and then we moved on to another topic. But artificial intelligence is really sort of key focus now. And there are 2 ways that artificial intelligence over the past few years have become contextualized. One is in the realm of ethics, and the other is in the realm of job displacement. And whereas artificial intelligence certainly has become something that needs to be dealt with ethically, the massive job displacement that have been talked about these past few years hasn't occurred. There hasn't been a mass job displacement at all. There has certainly been some examples of job displacement, but very few people have actually been losing their jobs because algorithms have taken over and taken their jobs. But if you look then of the ethical challenges to AI, you can see how this relates to growth. Because if you take the example of Apple's credit card, when it turned out that it was scoring men and women differently, it was, of course, a problem of bias. And when this was called out, and legislators started looking at this, whether or not this was a breach of the law or not, Apple couldn't really explain how the algorithm gave the results that it did. And this is, of course, a problem if you want to scale. So if you don't understand the way your algorithms are churning out results, it's very difficult to scale. And if you can't scale, you won't grow. So Apple certainly needed and needs to figure this out. There's the case, of course, of Google apologizing after its Vision AI produced racist results. And if your visual recognition tool, if you want to do, for instance, contact tracing using visual recognition algorithms, you can't have them being biased against race. It doesn't scale, right? So you need to overcome the current ethical challenges that you're facing. Another example is if you think of Amazon, super big company, they have over 100,000 jobs posted right now. So they're recruiting 100,000 people. Of course, they're looking into artificial intelligence for helping them with the recruitment process. But what they quickly understood was that they were not able to currently to properly curate the data sets. So they ended up with a gender bias in their recruitment AI, which of course, again, made it impossible to scale. So in order to think about the hurdles that you need to overcome in order to grow, you can think of something that Elon Musk said on his, not the most recent, but the first time he was on Joe Rogan. When Joe Rogan and Elon Musk talk about artificial intelligence, this is what Elon says about the dangers of AI.
But no, it's not necessarily bad. It's definitely going to be outside of human control.
Not necessarily bad, right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily bad. It's just outside of human control.
So what he's calling out is the need for control. So when you don't have control, you have uncertainty and you have unwillingness to sort of embrace the technology. And the way you create control is by creating transparency. So if you can understand what the algorithms are doing, if you can understand your technology, if you can create that understanding through transparency, so you don't have a black box, but you have actual true transparency across the complexities of artificial intelligence, then you can scale, then you can get cultural buy-in in the workforce, then you can foresee the implications that technology will have on the marketplace, on the workplace, and you can assess whether or not this is something that you should pursue in this or that specific project. So understanding comes out of transparency, which is a prerequisite for understanding. And once you have understanding, you can scale and then you have growth. So I think when we think about the impact of technologies coming at us out of the digitalization that we've been at for a long time, we need to figure out how to understand them so that we can come out on top, basically. And that is important for everybody in today's workplace. Okay, another macro trend that I'm seeing emerging. Radical self-reliance and personal responsibility will continue to grow in importance as key success factors for individuals embracing the inevitability of a digital workplace. In 1969, was it, over 500,000 people descended upon this little place up in the upper state of New York called Woodstock. And Woodstock was a music festival that lasted for a few days. And when the people left, there was this massive amount of garbage just spread out across this vast field where they had the concert. At the end of the concert, there's this famous shot of a helicopter flying over the festival site, and you can see this big peace sign built out of garbage bags that the kids had sort of put together. But anyway, at that time, it was certainly not a radically self-empowered youth that went to a rock show or a festival and went back leaving no trace. But if you think of Burning Man today, you basically almost have 100,000 people descending upon Black Rock every year, creating this massive temporary atmosphere. And this is a picture from August Man in 2014, I think, in August. Like a couple of months later, there's nothing left. Zero trace. They're leaving no trace whatsoever. So they have understood how to build sustainability into the concept of gathering like this. And I think this is something that we need to understand as well. We need to understand the bigger implications of our way of behaving and our work ways. And then finally, before we move into some Q&A maybe, the bonus trend. Community will continue to dismantle the notion of individualism as the primary model for digital resilience. And this, I think, also should be fairly self-evident in these COVID-19 times. If you think of the traditional model where you have an empowered individual, you can think of the server node network. Now, the problem with this model is that it has a great weakness, and that is if you take out the server, the whole network goes down. So it's not built for resilience, really. It was sort of a best effort at the time, but now we have something a little bit more like this, which is a much more resilient setup where you have a peer-to-peer community where everybody is basically equal on the internet, in the digital representation of ourselves as brands. We are basically just another brand, and there's great equality in that, and there's great resilience in that. So when something like COVID-19 or the pandemic spreads, you won't find solutions to those interconnected problems by turning to individualism and looking to a strong man having some sort of authoritarian unilateral messaging coming from above down onto you. You need to sort of understand how you fit into this. And, should you self-quarantine? Do you need a government-ordered lockdown to behave properly or not? So I think what we're moving into really, to summarize then, is we're turning into this global village, digital first, remote maybe, remote probably, and we are all connected, and there is a great, great opportunity here, because really what we want, you know how they say all the great things come out of diversified teams? Well, we want everybody connected. We want 10 billion people connected. We want 10 billion brains working together in a low material impact way. And that can only happen through a clever embracement of this digital transition. So to summarize and finally end then with this conclusion that Terence McKenna made, and he said, intelligence, this is what we have to make the forward escape into hyperspace. So there you go. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
So if you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A and they'll come through to me on my iPad, and I'll do my best to get them to Patrick. But I actually have some questions because I think that some of the things you touched on for me are very close to my heart, and some of them are very new concepts to me. So I really understand the whole idea about, your need to build a personal brand in the marketplace. And I work with many of my coaching clients to do just that. But when you say that influencers are sort of leading the way, are you saying that they become a brand that in the marketplace enables some commerce to happen? Well, tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, so I think more of them as models or structural images that you can latch on to. When I was recruited into IBM in 2010, I realized quickly that I had almost 500,000 really clever coworkers, and I could reach out to them over the internal chat. Anybody, and I was pretty sure that among those great colleagues, somebody knew something that I needed to know, and I started building this network. And building the network is something that you do through your own brand. So remember the old days of if not the bulletin boards, then the DC++ networks, where you had to share content in order to be able to download content. This was like pre-Napster era. The same is true then of building your building your brand in the network. So I think the influencer, the conception of the influencer as somebody who has, through his or her content provisioning, if you will, because they have something to offer for sure. They build they exercise this gravitational pull that lifts them
Which
up.
is great, right? So one of the things that I really see about that, and I see that with my clients as well, is that if somebody can be known for something inside a company, they can become a knowledge hub that connects them to other people, and that creates this effect of them having influence. So I understand, one of the things I really love people to really think about is, influencer, it doesn't just happen on Instagram. It's happening inside organizations. And you and I both had the experience of seeing that there are people in organizations who do not have, management titles or roles, but people gravitate towards them as leaders and as people that they want to interact with.
Right, and I think that in disruptive times, if you're solid in your own perception of what you can provide, the value that you can generate, then you're fine in terms of you may perhaps need to change, you need to move with the times, you need to do things slightly differently. But if you understand your value and what you can bring to the table, then that's fine. Right?
Yep. Can we jump to the macro trend of the global village? And for some strange reason, I quoted Marshall McLuhan on Facebook this morning with a friend, and then he popped up on screen. So it's the Marshall McLuhan energy in the room.
That's true.
But, one of the things that I think is really interesting when we talk about the global village and this interdependence is one of the things that I see in the marketplace is that people need to specialize. Like if you do want to have that influence, you need to now narrow your window down from being this wide generalist to having some specialty to base that influence around.
Right.
And then in a global village, and we can use large companies for this. I mean, I've just been working with a company who's got 300,000 people that they had to suddenly make remote workers. But inside that global village, I mean, how many specialists are inside there, and how much interdependency? And as we move forward, how do you think people can actually leverage that to their advantage in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think. Again, I think if you understand that everybody else in the company is also a node in the network, regardless of their position, regardless of their title, regardless of their hierarchical status, there is an equal need for everybody to contribute for the bottom line to be where it needs to be in terms of the company being perceived to provide value. So I think there's an opportunity here to think of yourself as perhaps more valuable than your role would perhaps indicate that you are, if you stick to the structural definition of value. So I think that's a big takeaway. Like, if it's like the network is really like a horizontally flat hierarchy, at best anyway. Then socially it may be completely different. But anyway, and I think that's a great lesson to sort of to internalize that you can have massive input if you just stick to your guns and you stick to what you think, what you believe is your value add into the situation, your reason for being there in the first place. Then if you stick to that, then that will push the rest through, I think. Interesting. So it's an uplifting, I think, way it's an energizing way to think.
It is a very energizing way to think, and it also helps you focus on your talents and skills.
Right.
And your own value proposition of the value you can actually deliver. And usually that's not encapsulated in your job title. It's something else that's behind the job title.
Right.
We've had some interesting questions come in. The first one's from Dennis Widmark. How do you see that the trend of everyone becoming brand works with the need to care about people's mental health and brain health? Always being available and being addicted to social media is one of the big and dangerous experiments made by big tech companies right now.
Yeah, so that's a super good question, and I would recommend everybody to read Douglas Rushkoff's Present Shock, which is the subtitle is When Everything Happens Now, which I think speaks to this. And I think, yes, there is certainly a completely detrimental impact being available online all the time. And I don't think human beings are geared up for that. I think you put it very nicely in the introduction, talking about the adaptability of human and the human nervous system. And we can certainly adapt and align with anything and everything. But the question is, should we?
Yes, definitely.
And I think there is certainly a case to be made for being able to switch on and switch off.
Yeah.
I know that there was this book out with Fast and Slow Thinking and this whole thing. And I think there's great value to be able to go down. Like you have to come down. You have to reorient yourself. I mean, I'm a big fan of the outdoors. I think go out, hug trees, swim in the sea, do these things to feel grounded in Mother Nature. I think that's the way to unwind and reconnect and have the mental health aspect being sort of addressed. I don't think, I'm not standing here advocating a full move into the digital non-biological abstraction of ourselves.
And certainly, you know, the current trend is that we actually may be able to spend more time offline if we can get some of these things right.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's a big surprise. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, perhaps initially, when this work from home was forced upon us, felt that, oh, now I need to be available and show myself to be available all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. And a lot of people did that and had less time for their private life.
Yeah.
But as you said, things have changed quite drastically over these past few weeks.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are understanding that, hey, if I can be remotely available at times without having to spend time moving from A to B, that frees up time.
Yeah.
So I can maintain my productivity in a shorter period of time, and that additional time I can spend on my health.
Yeah, and I experienced exactly that because I've just been speaking to people in 14 countries and I never left my kitchen table.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I live right near a lake and I go for a swim straight after I speak.
Perfect.
So incredible. We have a question from Getty. Thank you, Getty, for tuning in. For a digital community to be successful, how do you think different languages, cultures and subcultures will fit in a model of AI? Will AI only take their larger tribes and cultures into account? What will that do with minorities? Thank you, Getty, for that amazing question.
Great question. And I think there will certainly be a push towards homogeneous protocols because there is great efficiencies to be had there. But I think it's completely unlikely that will be successful over time. I think minorities will continuously re-emerge, be redefined, and there will always be a plethora of diversified tribal cultures on the net, for sure.
Yeah.
And it will simply be impossible to reel everybody in and say, oh, well, let's do Esperanto or that language that we tried to get in place previously. So I think like minorities, diversity, it will take care of itself, like organically on the net for sure.
And of course, all of those minorities working on the net are feeding data to the net, which is helping to create the algorithms and the kind of technology we're going to interact with.
Right. But having said that, I do think that there is an active need to push the diversified agenda forward. I don't think we can be laid back and say, well, it'll work itself out organically, which perhaps may be the case. But we can radically accelerate the change by actively feeding into the bigger picture the minority point of view, whatever that is.
Yeah. We had one last question, which was around, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the person's name, but when we talk about creating this brave new world, who are we creating it for? You know, it's sort of it was a big philosophical question, but, you know, do you see that the changes that we're making are really going to have a lot of benefit for humanity? You're at the coalface of this technology, this AI. You've been working on this, you know, for 20 plus years academically and in the marketplace. Do you see this push forward technologically as making us happier, healthier?
Yeah. So in short, no. I think that it was the French sociologist Jacques Ellul who said there are no political solutions, only technological ones. Now, I'm not necessarily siding with that, but I think there is certainly a pressure on asking ourselves, you know, what is technology for? And to sort of maybe end on that note, to return to Marshall McLuhan.
Yeah.
Marshall McLuhan is the most quotable guy. But he said, among other brilliant things, he said, human beings are the genitals of our technology. We only exist to produce next year's model.
Wow.
Right? So perhaps we are not it. Perhaps the human is not the main event. But joking aside, I think that we need to apply a cautious mentality and again, you know, an intelligent mentality onto technology and onto politics and really work these things out.
Yeah.
I think it is completely detrimental to think that big tech, big corporations, big pharma will work it out for everybody's benefit, because that has not been the case. If you look back over history, you've seen. I mean, yes, Rosling for sure. It's getting better and better, but the divide is getting bigger and bigger. And the digital divide, or whether or not you're part of the global tribe or not, also enforces change. So I think if you think of the United States as the most technological developing country in the world, maybe it's not. I mean, but if you think about that, it is at least very savvy when it comes to tech, but it is also extremely unjust. It does not distribute the wealth coming out of technology across the entire population within the country or globally. So therefore, you can certainly ask yourself, is the system working for us, or is the system working for those that are able to figure out how the system works and then work the system for them?
Well, I'm certainly glad someone with a background in humanities is working with one of the biggest companies of the world on these.
It's an honor to work
challenges.
for IBM, I must say.
Yeah, it's great. It's an honor for us to have you here with us today as the first speaker at the Digital Workplace Summit. Thank you for your contributions.
Thank you.